My brother lost his job and moved in with us and Mom. He stole Mom's laptop and gaming console. Hey everyone, Jake, 34M, have been lurking on this subreddit for a while, but today I really need some advice because my life has turned into one giant mess. I've been living at home with my mom for the last couple of years after my dad passed away unexpectedly. It wasn't what I imagined for myself, but after the funeral, it just felt like the right thing to do. Mom's always been a kind but fragile woman, and I wanted to help her get back on her feet emotionally and financially. I work as a software engineer, and while the hours are grueling, the pay is decent enough to support us both. Mom's a homemaker, and with Dad gone, her entire world kind of crumbled. I didn't mind stepping up. I've always been the responsible one in the family. But that dynamic started to shift a couple of months ago when my older brother Logan, 39M, moved back in. For context, Logan's always been the golden child. You know the type. Star athlete in high school, charming, and Mom and Dad's pride and joy. I've been in his shadow my whole life, which I thought I'd made peace with. But then he showed up at our doorstep, bags in hand, after losing his job and breaking up with his girlfriend of 8 years. Logan's arrival was dramatic, to say the least. I came home from work one evening to find him sitting at the kitchen table, a bottle of whiskey in front of him, and Mom fussing over him like he was still her baby boy. Apparently, he'd been let go from his cushy sales job a few months prior and had been couch surfing until his girlfriend kicked him out. He hadn't told anyone about his situation until it got dire, and now he had no place else to go. Mom, of course, welcomed him with open arms. "You'll always have a home here, sweetheart," she said, as if he hadn't just spent the last decade pretending she didn't exist unless it was convenient for him. I gritted my teeth and forced a smile, but inside, I was already bracing for the storm. At first, I thought maybe this could be a good thing. Logan and I haven't been close in years, and I figured this was a chance to reconnect. But within days, it became clear that Logan hadn't come back to rebuild his life. He'd come back to be coddled. I've been living with my mom for the past 2 years, ever since my dad passed away unexpectedly. It wasn't how I imagined my life would be at 34, but I stepped up because it felt like the right thing to do. Mom needed emotional and financial support, and I could provide both. My job as a software engineer pays well, and I don't mind working long hours to keep us comfortable. At least, I didn't mind until Logan moved in. Logan is my older brother, and at 39, he's always been the golden child of the family. Growing up, he was the star athlete, the one who could charm anyone, and the clear favorite of our parents. Meanwhile, I was the responsible, quiet one, the one who followed the rules and didn't get into trouble. I thought I'd made peace with that dynamic, but everything changed a few months ago when Logan showed up at the house with nothing but a duffel bag and a sob story. He'd lost his job and his long-term girlfriend in the same month. Apparently, he'd been couch surfing for weeks before his situation became so dire that he had no choice but to move back home. Mom welcomed him with open arms, acting as if her long-lost prince had finally returned. She cooked him a big dinner that first night, fussing over him like he was still a kid. I tried to be supportive, but deep down, I already knew this wasn't going to go well. At first, Logan claimed he needed time to recover from his emotional burnout. He said he was planning to take a week or 2 to decompress before jumping back into the job market. That week turned into 2, and then 3. Before I knew it, months had passed, and Logan was still doing absolutely nothing. His days consisted of waking up at noon, playing video games, and scrolling through social media. He didn't lift a finger around the house, let alone contribute financially. The worst part was his spending. Logan might have been unemployed, but that didn't stop him from blowing money on ridiculous things. One evening, I came home from work to find a massive box sitting in the living room. At first, I thought it was something practical, like a desk or a chair for job hunting. But no, it was a $600 gaming chair with LED lights and built-in speakers. When I asked him how he paid for it, he casually mentioned that he used the joint credit card Mom had given him for emergencies. I was furious. I tried to explain to Logan that an expensive gaming chair didn't qualify as an emergency, but he just shrugged and went back to assembling it. When I brought it up with Mom later, she defended him. "He's going through a tough time," she said. "You can't expect him to bounce back overnight." That's the kind of response I've been dealing with ever since Logan moved in. Mom refuses to hold him accountable, and Logan takes full advantage of it. The tension in the house started to build when Logan's spending spiraled even further out of control. Over the next few weeks, I noticed more packages arriving: designer sneakers, noise-canceling headphones, and even a high-end gaming keyboard. He claimed it was all part of his new plan to become a professional Twitch streamer. He even had the audacity to tell me that his streaming career would eventually pay off and make up for everything. Meanwhile, I was covering all the bills: the mortgage, utilities, groceries, and internet. Logan didn't even pretend to help. It wasn't just the financial strain that was driving me crazy. Logan's behavior started affecting our neighbors, too. One afternoon, our next-door neighbor, Mrs. Callahan, stopped me as I was coming home from work. She's a sweet, retired schoolteacher who's always been kind to our family. She looked concerned as she asked, "Jake, is everything all right with your brother? I've noticed a lot of packages being delivered lately, and he mentioned something about investing in his streaming career. He even asked me if I wanted to subscribe to his Twitch channel." I was mortified. Not only was Logan wasting money, but he was also involving the neighbors in his ridiculous schemes. That night, I confronted him again. I found him in his room, surrounded by his latest purchases, and told him he needed to start contributing or find somewhere else to live. He barely looked up from his screen and said, "Chill out, Jake. This is an investment. You'll thank me later." I felt like I was losing my mind. Every time I tried to set boundaries, Logan brushed me off, and Mom made excuses for him. She'd say things like, "Families take care of each other," or "He's trying his best." But the truth was, Logan wasn't trying at all. He was perfectly content to live rent-free and let me shoulder all the responsibility. The breaking point came when Logan threw a party without telling anyone. He called it a launch party for his Twitch channel and invited half a dozen people over. These weren't friends or family. They were complete strangers he'd met online. They turned our living room into some kind of makeshift studio, blasting music and shouting over each other. The noise was unbearable, and when the party finally ended, the house was a disaster. Empty beer cans and pizza boxes were everywhere, and someone had even spilled something sticky all over the carpet. The next morning, I confronted Logan yet again. "You trashed the house, Logan," I said, my voice shaking with anger. "And who's going to clean it up? Mom?" Logan just rolled his eyes and said, "You're overreacting. It was just a small gathering." For the first time, I saw Mom hesitate. She didn't jump to Logan's defense like she usually did. Maybe she was starting to realize how out of control things had gotten. But even then, she didn't say anything to him. She just sighed and started cleaning up the mess herself. That's where things stand now. Logan continues to live here rent-free, spending money recklessly and refusing to take responsibility for anything. I'm stuck covering the bills and playing the bad guy every time I try to call him out. I don't know how much longer I can keep doing this. Every day feels like a new level of frustration, and I don't see a way out. Living with Logan was already a daily exercise in frustration, but things escalated to a new level when I found out he'd been borrowing money from Mom. I came across it by accident. Mom had left her purse on the kitchen counter one morning, and her bank statement was sticking out. I wasn't trying to snoop, but the numbers caught my eye. There was a recent withdrawal of $800. The thing was, Mom never withdrew large amounts of cash. She barely spent money on herself, aside from groceries and the occasional trip to the pharmacy. At first, I thought maybe it was a mistake. Or worse, someone had stolen from her account. I brought it up with her that evening while Logan was busy streaming. Mom's face went pale, and she hesitated before saying Logan needed some extra money for a personal expense. He promised to pay it back as soon as he could. I felt a surge of anger and disbelief. He borrowed $800? For what? He's not even working, Mom. She avoided my eyes and muttered something about Logan trying to get back on his feet. That was her go-to excuse for everything he did. I pressed her for more details, but she shut down the conversation, clearly uncomfortable. I knew then that this wasn't just a one-time thing. I waited until Logan was off his stream and confronted him directly. He didn't even try to deny it. "Yeah, I borrowed some money," he said, leaning back in his stupid gaming chair like he didn't have a care in the world. "Mom said it was fine." "Fine? Logan, you've been here for months without contributing a dime. Now you're borrowing hundreds from her? Do you even plan to pay her back? Of course I do, he said with a smirk. Once my channel starts making money, I'll take care of everything. That was the same excuse he'd been using for months. I wanted to scream, but I knew it wouldn't do any good. Logan lived in his own reality, one where he wasn't responsible for anything and everyone else had to pick up the slack. The next blow came a week later. I was going through our monthly bills, something I always handled because Mom found it overwhelming, and noticed a charge I didn't recognize. It was for $150 from some streaming service. At first, I thought it was a billing error. Then I remembered Logan had been talking about upgrading his streaming setup to include more premium features. I marched straight to his room, bill in hand. Logan, did you sign up for a premium streaming service? There's a $150 charge on the account. He looked at me like I was overreacting. Oh, yeah. I needed it for the channel. It's an investment. An investment? Logan, this isn't your money. Do you even realize how tight things are? I'm the one paying these bills. Relax, Jake, he said, brushing me off. You act like I'm out here buying yachts or something. It's just $150. It's $150 we can't afford. I snapped. You're not contributing anything, Logan. How do you not see the problem here? But Logan didn't care. He went back to his screen, muttering something about how I needed to chill out. It was infuriating. Every time I tried to hold him accountable, he dismissed me like I was being unreasonable. The tension in the house was at an all-time high. Mom started walking on eggshells, clearly caught between her two sons. She hated conflict, and Logan knew it. He used her discomfort to his advantage, playing the victim whenever I confronted him. It was like he had a sixth sense for manipulating her. Things took another shocking turn when one of Logan's so-called streaming buddies showed up at the house unannounced. His name was Brandon, and he looked like he hadn't showered in days. He was carrying a giant box filled with camera equipment and told me he was there to help Logan take his channel to the next level. I had no idea Logan was even planning this. Brandon set up shop in the living room, turning it into a makeshift studio. There were wires and lights everywhere, and the whole house felt like it had been invaded. When I asked Logan what the hell was going on, he acted like it was no big deal. Brandon's staying for a few days to help me with the channel. Don't worry about it. A few days? Logan, this isn't a hotel. But he ignored me, as usual. Brandon ended up staying for over a week, eating our food and adding to the chaos. Mom tried to keep the peace, but I could see the stress wearing on her. She looked tired all the time, and I knew she was struggling to keep up with Logan's demands. The breaking point came when I overheard a conversation between Logan and Brandon late one night. They were sitting in the living room, talking about their business plan. Logan was bragging about how easy it was to get money from Mom, and how he didn't have to worry about bills because Jake's got it covered. I felt my blood boil. It was one thing for Logan to take advantage of me and Mom, but to openly brag about it? That was a new low. I stormed into the room and confronted him in front of Brandon. You think this is funny, Logan? Taking advantage of Mom and me like this? Logan looked startled for a moment, but then he recovered and gave me his usual smirk. Calm down, Jake. You're always so uptight. No, Logan, I'm done. You're a grown man acting like a spoiled teenager. If you don't start contributing, you're out. Brandon tried to chime in, but I cut him off. And you can pack up your crap and leave too. This isn't your house. It was the first time I saw Logan genuinely angry. He stormed off to his room, slamming the door behind him. Brandon left the next morning, muttering something about how I'd killed the vibe. Mom begged me to give Logan another chance, but I was at my wit's end. I couldn't keep enabling him, no matter how much she wanted to. Things couldn't go on like this. Something had to change. It was a quiet Sunday morning, and I was sitting at the kitchen table with my coffee, staring at the stack of bills in front of me. Logan hadn't paid for a single thing since he moved in, and it was beyond clear that he wasn't planning to start anytime soon. His gaming escapades, his freeloading friends, and the additional expenses he piled onto the household had turned my once manageable finances into a ticking time bomb. The breaking point wasn't just about money anymore. It was about respect. Mom came into the kitchen, humming a tune as she prepared breakfast. She glanced at me, and immediately noticed my tense expression. "What's wrong, Jake?" she asked, setting a plate of toast in front of me. "It's Logan," I replied, not even bothering to sugarcoat it. "This can't go on, Mom. He's adding $150 to our bills every month with his streaming services, borrowing money from you, and refuses to get a job. I'm covering everything, and I can't keep doing it." Mom looked uncomfortable. "I know it's frustrating, but he's your brother. Families support each other, especially during hard times." "Support each other? Mom, he's taking advantage of us, and you know it. I'm giving him an ultimatum today. He either starts paying $1,000 a month, or he moves out." Her face fell. "Jake, that's too harsh. He's not ready. He'll never be ready if we keep letting him act like this." My voice was firm, and for the first time, I didn't back down when she gave me her pleading look. "It's not fair to me, and honestly, it's not fair to you either." The confrontation happened that evening. Logan strolled into the living room after one of his gaming sessions, looking as carefree as ever. I was waiting for him on the couch, my arms crossed and the bills spread out on the coffee table. He barely glanced at them as he flopped onto his gaming chair. "We need to talk," I said, my tone leaving no room for argument. "What now?" Logan groaned, reaching for his phone. "Is this about the Wi-Fi? It's been lagging lately. You should upgrade." I stared at him, dumbfounded by his audacity. "No, Logan, this is about you freeloading off me and Mom for months without contributing anything. This ends now. Starting next month, you're paying $1,000 toward the household expenses, or you're out." He finally looked up, his expression a mix of disbelief and amusement. "You're joking, right? Do I look like I'm joking?" I shot back. Logan leaned back in his chair, smirking. "Jake, you're such a control freak. I get it. You think you're the responsible one because you pay the bills. But you don't know what it's like to lose everything. I'm rebuilding my life, and instead of supporting me, you're trying to kick me out. That's not what this is about, and you know it," I said, keeping my voice as steady as possible. "This is about you refusing to take any responsibility while the rest of us pick up the slack. If you can afford $600 gaming chairs and premium streaming services, you can afford to contribute." Logan's smirk vanished, replaced by a scowl. "You've always been jealous, Jake. Mom and Dad loved me more, and you can't stand it. That's what this is really about, isn't it? You're spoiled and selfish, and now you're trying to punish me for being the favorite." The accusation hit harder than I expected. For years, I'd felt like the shadow to Logan's golden child, but hearing him throw it in my face was like pouring salt on an old wound. Still, I wasn't about to let him derail the conversation. "This isn't about the past," I said sharply. "It's about the present. You're 39 years old, Logan. Grow up. Either pay your share or find somewhere else to live." Logan shot up from his chair, his face red with anger. "You don't get to talk to me like that in my own house." "Your house?" I barked out a laugh. "You don't pay for anything here, Logan. This is Mom's house, and I'm the one keeping the lights on. If anyone should leave, it's you." The shouting match must have been loud enough to wake the neighbors, because there was a sudden knock at the door. I opened it to find Mrs. Callahan, our next-door neighbor, standing there with a worried look on her face. "Is everything all right in here?" she asked, glancing between me and Logan. "It's fine," Logan said before I could answer, his tone dripping with fake politeness. "Just a little family disagreement." Mrs. Callahan didn't look convinced. "Jake, do you need anything?" I forced a smile, not wanting to drag her into our mess. "Thanks, Mrs. Callahan, but we're fine. I'll let you know if we need anything." She nodded reluctantly and left, but the encounter only fueled Logan's anger. "See what you've done?" he snapped. "Now the whole neighborhood thinks I'm some kind of loser." "I didn't do that, Logan," I said, my voice low. "You did." Logan stormed out of the room, slamming his door so hard that one of Mom's picture frames fell off the wall. Mom came in a few minutes later, her face pale and her hands trembling. "Jake, maybe you should just let this go," she said quietly. "Logan's going through so much right now." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Let it go? Mom, he's treating us like his personal bank and acting like he's the victim. When is enough enough?" She didn't answer, just shook her head and walked away. I knew then that I couldn't count on her to back me up. This fight was mine to handle, and no matter how ugly it got, I wasn't backing down. The next morning, Logan was gone. His room was empty, and his gaming chair sat abandoned in the middle of the floor. For a brief moment, I felt relieved. Maybe he'd finally taken me seriously and decided to move out. But that relief was short-lived when I checked my bank account later that day. There was a $400 withdrawal I didn't recognize. It didn't take long to figure out where the money went. Logan had stolen my debit card before leaving. He left a smug note on the counter. "Thanks for the support, little bro, don't worry. I'll pay you back once I hit it big." I reported the theft to the bank and canceled the card, but the damage was already done. Logan had crossed a line, and there was no coming back from it. This wasn't just about money anymore. It was about trust, respect, and the fact that Logan had taken advantage of me and Mom for far too long. Something had to change. And if he thought he could just walk away from this without consequences, he was in for a rude awakening. It happened on a Monday morning. I woke up, still furious from the heated argument with Logan the night before. The ultimatum was clear: pay $1,000 a month or leave. I had expected resistance, another smug retort, maybe even another lecture about how I was the spoiled one. But instead, the house was eerily quiet. Too quiet. Logan was always the first to make noise, usually yelling into his microphone during a stream or stomping through the kitchen to raid the fridge. I walked down the hallway and noticed his door slightly ajar. The silence made my chest tighten. Something felt off. Pushing the door open, I saw that his room was empty, completely cleared out except for a few scattered items. His gaming chair was gone, the LED lights stripped from the walls, and his clothes were no longer spilling out of the closet. For a split second, I felt a wave of relief. Maybe, just maybe, he had taken me seriously. Maybe he had finally grown up and decided to start over somewhere else. But that hope shattered the moment I looked closer at the room. The place was a disaster. The carpet was ripped in 2 spots, as if someone had dragged something heavy across it without a care. There was a dark stain near the corner, sticky to the touch and reeking of some kind of energy drink or alcohol. The wall behind where his desk had been was scuffed and dented, the paint scraped away in long, jagged streaks. I bent down to inspect the carpet, and that's when I noticed something glinting in the corner: a torn cable from a headset. Next to it was a crushed soda can, half empty and leaking onto the floorboards. My stomach churned. This wasn't just carelessness. This was deliberate. Logan hadn't just left. He trashed the place on his way out. Fuming, I grabbed my phone and called him. It went straight to voicemail. No surprise there. I shot him a text instead. "What the hell is wrong with you? You're gone, but you couldn't even leave the room intact? Clean this up, or I'll make sure Mom knows exactly how you left things." I didn't expect a response, and I didn't get one. Later that morning, I went back into his room to start cleaning up. That's when I noticed more things missing. Not just his stuff, but mine. The watch Dad had given me for my 30th birthday, a sleek $700 Seiko I only wore on special occasions, was gone from its box. I tore through my room, checking drawers and shelves, but it was nowhere to be found. I checked the bathroom next and realized a set of colognes Mom had given me for Christmas was missing too. My blood boiled. Logan hadn't just left a mess behind. He'd stolen from us. I called Mom immediately. She was at the grocery store, and her soft, hesitant voice made my heart ache. "Mom, when was the last time you saw my watch?" I asked, trying to sound calm. "Oh, honey, I think I saw it on your dresser the other day." "Why? Is it missing?" "Yes, it's missing. And some of your gifts to me are gone too." There was a pause, and then her voice dropped to a whisper. "Jake, do you think Logan?" "I don't think, Mom. I know." I told her about the state of his room, the missing items, and how Logan hadn't answered my calls. I could hear the heartbreak in her sigh. I don't understand why he'd do this," she said. "I know he's been struggling, but struggling doesn't give him the right to steal from us, Mom. This isn't about hard times. It's about respect." When she got home, we both went through the house together. It was worse than I thought. Mom's jewelry box was lighter than it had been last week. A small diamond bracelet Dad had given her on their 25th anniversary was missing, along with a pair of earrings she rarely wore. Mom broke down in tears, and I had to physically stop myself from grabbing my car keys and driving off to track Logan down. We spent hours cleaning the mess he'd left behind. I scrubbed the sticky stain out of the carpet while Mom tried to fix the scuffs on the wall. Every new discovery, another missing item, another mark on the furniture, felt like a fresh slap in the face. By the end of the day, we were both exhausted, emotionally and physically. That evening, as I sat at the kitchen table, trying to process everything, the doorbell rang. It was Brandon, Logan's so-called streaming buddy, standing there with a smug look on his face and a package in hand. "What do you want?" I asked, not bothering to hide my irritation. "Hey man, just dropping off some of Logan's stuff. He said he forgot it." He handed me the package, a crumpled cardboard box with Logan's name scrawled on the side. I opened it right there on the porch. Inside were a few random cables, a broken mouse, and a tattered hoodie. Nothing valuable, nothing that could even begin to make up for what he'd taken. "Is this some kind of joke?" I asked, glaring at Brandon. He shrugged. "Don't shoot the messenger, man. Logan told me to drop it off, so here I am. Tell Logan he owes us, big time. And if I don't get my stuff back, I'm filing a police report." Brandon looked genuinely startled at that. Whoa, no need to go nuclear. I'm just the middleman." I slammed the door in his face. That night, I sat down with Mom and laid out a plan. We'd change the locks, document everything that was missing, and contact the police if Logan didn't return our belongings. Mom was hesitant. She hated the idea of getting the authorities involved, but I reminded her that this wasn't just about us anymore. Logan needed to face the consequences of his actions, no matter how painful it was for her to accept. The house felt emptier without Logan, but not in a good way. His departure left behind a trail of destruction, both physical and emotional. Mom walked around like a ghost for days, barely speaking except to ask if I'd heard from him. I hadn't, and honestly, I didn't want to. He'd made his choice, and now it was time for us to pick up the pieces. As I stared at the torn carpet in his room, I made a promise to myself. I'd never let Logan take advantage of us again. He might have been family, but even family had limits. It had been about 2 weeks since Logan moved out, and while the house was quieter, the tension wasn't gone. Mom was still upset over the missing jewelry, and I couldn't stop thinking about my stolen watch. We'd contacted the police about the thefts, but without concrete evidence, they couldn't do much. Logan had gone radio silent, ignoring my calls and texts, and Mom couldn't bring herself to reach out to him. It was like a dark cloud still hung over us, a constant reminder of the mess he'd left behind. Then, one morning, things got even worse. It started when Mom went to grab her laptop from the living room. She'd been using it more often lately, probably as a way to distract herself. But that morning, it wasn't where she'd left it. She tore the room apart looking for it, her voice growing more panicked with each passing minute. "Jake, I swear I left it right here on the coffee table last night." I joined her search, but it quickly became clear that the laptop wasn't misplaced. It was gone. My stomach sank as I realized what this probably meant. "Mom, are you sure you didn't move it to your room or the kitchen?" I asked, hoping against hope that it was just a mistake. "No, Jake, I'm not losing my mind. Someone must have taken it." Her voice cracked, and I could see the fear in her eyes. My first thought was Logan, but I didn't want to jump to conclusions. Still, I couldn't ignore the nagging feeling in my gut. As we continued searching, I noticed something else missing: Mom's console. She'd recently bought a Nintendo Switch after seeing one of her friends playing games with their grandkids. It had become her little escape, something to make her smile after everything we'd been through. And now it was gone too. "Mom," I said carefully, trying not to alarm her, "did you let anyone into the house last night? Maybe a friend or a neighbor?" "No, of course not," she said, her voice trembling. "I locked the doors before I went to bed, like I always do. I checked the locks on the front and back doors, and both were secure." That's when it hit me: the windows. I went room to room, checking each one until I found it. The window in the den was slightly open, not enough to be obvious, but just enough for someone to slip through. My heart raced as I noticed faint smudges on the windowsill, like someone had climbed in. "Jake," Mom called from her room, her voice shaking. My jewelry box. It's gone. I rushed to her room and found her standing by the dresser, staring at the empty space where the box had been. This wasn't just a random theft. Whoever had taken the laptop and the console had also known exactly where to find her jewelry. And there was only one person who knew the layout of our house that well. Logan. The realization hit me like a punch to the gut. I wanted to believe he wouldn't stoop this low, but the evidence was piling up. Still, I needed proof before I did anything. That's when I remembered Mrs. Callahan. She'd recently installed security cameras around her property after a string of petty thefts in the neighborhood. If Logan had broken in, there was a good chance her cameras had caught something. I grabbed my coat and headed next door, explaining the situation as calmly as I could. Mrs. Callahan was more than willing to help. She led me to her den, where her security system was set up, and we started scrolling through the footage from the night before. At first, there was nothing unusual, just the quiet street and the occasional car passing by. But then, at exactly 3:45 a.m., we saw him. Logan. He appeared on the edge of the screen, wearing a hoodie pulled low over his face, but there was no mistaking his build or the way he walked. He crept along the side of our house, glancing around nervously before disappearing out of view. Moments later, the footage showed him climbing out the back window with a duffel bag slung over his shoulder. My blood boiled as I watched him dart across the yard and disappear into the night. "There's no question," I said, my voice cold. "It's him." Mrs. Callahan looked horrified. "I'm so sorry, Jake. I never would have imagined." "It's not your fault," I said quickly. "Thank you for letting me see this. I'm going to the police." When I got back home, Mom was sitting on the couch, clutching a photo of Logan from when he was a kid. She looked up at me with tear-filled eyes. "Did you find anything?" I hesitated for a moment, but she deserved the truth. "It was him, Mom. Logan broke in last night and took your things." I saw it on Mrs. Callahan's cameras. Her face crumpled, and she let out a shaky sob. "How could he do this, Jake? How could he steal from his own family?" I didn't have an answer. All I could do was sit next to her and let her cry. But inside, I was seething. Logan had crossed a line that couldn't be ignored. I tried to give him the benefit of the doubt, to believe he could change, but he'd proven me wrong time and time again. I spent the rest of the afternoon gathering everything I needed: the footage from Mrs. Callahan, the inventory of missing items, and the police report from the earlier thefts. By the time I walked into the police station, I was more determined than ever to make sure Logan faced the consequences of his actions. The officer who took my statement was sympathetic but firm. "If what you're saying is true, we'll issue a warrant for his arrest." "Do you have a current address for him?" I didn't, but I knew where he liked to hang out: an old friend's apartment on the other side of town. Logan had mentioned it in passing when he first moved in, back when he was still pretending to look for a job. I gave the officer the address and left the station feeling a mix of anger and relief. I didn't want to see my brother in jail, but at this point, I didn't see any other way to stop him. That night, Mom and I sat in the living room, the emptiness of the house feeling heavier than ever. She was quiet, lost in her thoughts, and I didn't push her to talk. We both needed time to process what had happened. I don't know what the future holds for Logan, but one thing is certain: he's not the person I thought he was. And as much as it hurts, I can't keep letting him drag us down. Family or not, some lines can't be crossed. A week after filing the police report, I got a call that made my stomach churn. It was from Officer Rains, the detective handling the case. He told me they tracked Logan down and arrested him the night before. My initial reaction was relief. Logan was finally being held accountable for his actions. But as the news sank in, so did the weight of what it meant. My brother was in jail. The details were even worse than I imagined. Logan had been caught red-handed trying to steal over $2,500 worth of electronics from an upscale electronics store downtown. He'd walked in with a duffel bag and attempted to bypass security by stuffing items into it while pretending to browse. A sharp-eyed employee noticed him acting suspicious and called the police. By the time Logan tried to leave, officers were already waiting outside. They found the duffel bag loaded with high-end headphones, a gaming console, and several expensive cameras. When Officer Rains finished explaining, I thanked him and hung up, feeling a strange mix of emotions. Part of me wanted to shake Logan and ask him what the hell he was thinking. Another part of me just felt sad. For him, for Mom, and for the family we used to be. I debated whether to tell Mom right away. She'd been holding up surprisingly well since the break-in, but I knew this would hit her hard. In the end, I decided it was better for her to hear it from me than from anyone else. I found her in the kitchen, sorting through old photo albums. She'd been doing that a lot lately, as if searching for some version of Logan she could still recognize. "Mom," I said gently, sitting down across from her. "I need to tell you something." She looked up, her face lined with worry. "What is it, Jake? Did they find Logan?" I nodded. "He's been arrested. He was caught trying to steal from an electronics store." Her hand flew to her mouth, and for a moment, I thought she might cry. But instead, she just closed her eyes and let out a shaky breath. "Oh, Logan, what have you done?" I told her everything Officer Rains had shared, sparing no details. Mom listened quietly, her expression shifting between sadness and disbelief. When I finished, she shook her head slowly. "I don't understand how things got this bad. He wasn't always like this, Jake." "I know," I said, though I wasn't sure if I believed it anymore. Logan had always been self-centered, but this level of recklessness and disregard for others felt like a whole new low. Over the next few days, I tried to focus on work and maintaining some sense of normalcy, but the situation with Logan loomed over everything. Then, out of nowhere, his face popped up on my phone screen. Not a call, God forbid Logan actually talked to me, but a post on social media. It was a long, rambling diatribe about how he'd been unfairly kicked out of his family home and how I was the one to blame. He painted himself as the victim, claiming he'd been trying to get back on his feet when I forced him out and turned Mom against him. According to Logan, I was the golden child, the one who had everything handed to me, while he'd been left to fend for himself. The post was filled with dramatic phrases like, "betrayed by my own blood," and "destroyed my family for money." He even included a picture of himself from years ago, back when he was still working his sales job and looked put together, as if to remind everyone of the person he used to be. The comments were a mix of sympathy from his friends and disbelief from people who knew better. One comment in particular caught my eye. It was from Brandon, his so-called streaming buddy. "Man, Jake always seemed like a control freak. You're better off without him. Keep your head up, bro." I wanted to punch a wall. Logan wasn't just lying. He was rewriting history. I debated whether to respond but decided against it. Engaging would only make things worse, and I didn't want to stoop to his level. Instead, I focused on making sure Mom didn't see the post. She didn't use social media much, but I knew it would devastate her if she stumbled across it. Unfortunately, Logan wasn't content to leave things there. Over the next week, he kept posting, each story more dramatic than the last. In one post, he claimed I had physically threatened him, forcing him to leave the house in fear for his safety. In another, he accused me of stealing from him, saying I'd taken his gaming equipment and sold it for profit. None of it was true, but the lies kept piling up. One night, while scrolling through my phone, I came across a new post. This time, Logan had tagged several family members, including our Aunt Marjorie and cousin Alex. He'd never been close to them, but he must have figured he could gain their sympathy. His caption read, "It's sad when your own family turns against you. Jake and Mom kicked me out when I needed them the most, and now they won't even let me explain my side. This isn't what family is supposed to be." The next morning, Aunt Marjorie called me. She was furious. "Jake, what is going on? Why is Logan saying you kicked him out? He's your brother. Families don't do this to each other." I spent nearly an hour explaining everything. The freeloading, the theft, the break-in. By the time I finished, Marjorie was silent. "I had no idea," she said finally. "Logan made it sound like you just turned on him for no reason." "That's what he does," I said. "He manipulates people into feeling sorry for him, so he doesn't have to take responsibility for anything." Marjorie promised to talk to Alex and clear things up, but the damage had already been done. Logan's posts were spreading like wildfire, and I couldn't control the narrative. It felt like he was trying to burn every bridge he had left, and I was caught in the crossfire. Meanwhile, the legal case against Logan moved forward. The footage from Mrs. Callahan's cameras, combined with the evidence from the electronics store, left little room for doubt. Logan was charged with burglary and attempted theft, and his court date was set for the following month. Mom and I didn't plan to attend, but part of me wondered if seeing us there might force him to confront what he'd done. As the days went by, I found myself oscillating between anger and sadness. I was angry at Logan for everything he'd done, for stealing from us, lying about us, and refusing to take any responsibility. But I was also sad for the brother I used to look up to, the one who used to sneak me candy when Mom wasn't looking and cheer the loudest at my high school soccer games. That Logan was gone, replaced by someone I barely recognized. In the end, I realized there was only one thing I could do: let go. Logan had made his choices, and now he had to live with the consequences. All I could do was protect Mom, rebuild our lives, and hope that someday he'd find his way back to being the person he used to be. But until then, I had to move forward, even if it meant leaving him behind.